today's meeting, Introduction to Agriculture Standards and Schemes for Commercial Horticulture Production. I'd like to introduce you all to Malcolm Laidlaw from ML3 Technical, who will be taking today's meeting. Malcolm comes highly recommended to us from growers that he's supported to get up to speed on insurance schemes. So before I hand over, a couple of housekeeping rules for just, if you wouldn't mind staying muted when you're not speaking, but it is a meeting and an interactive session, so please feel free to put your hand up and ask questions or put questions in the chat box. We will be recording the session and it will be posted on the Knowledge Hub. So over to you, Malcolm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So very brief sort of agenda, a little bit of background into who I am, a little bit of a discussion about what's the difference between certification and accreditation. We'll then go through some different types of farm certification and the different standards, talk about the benefits, disadvantages, and then just some questions to consider. So who am I? I'm a technical consultant. I work for myself. Previous to working for myself, I started off as a microbiologist, worked in a lab, then worked in food factories, so dairy, frozen sausages, and fresh veg. When I worked in the fresh veg factory, a lot of our product ended up in M&S ready meals. And this was around the time that they were relaunching their field to fork, which is now Select Farm standard. So I used to go out and audit growers against the M&S standard. Growers generally very, very good at growing products. Paperwork could be slightly better. So that was the aim of my business, was actually sort of designed to help mainly farmers, but also pack houses set up and become certified to whichever standard they wanted to. I've got around about 25 different customers at the moment, ranging from Inverness down to Northampton and across to Anglesey. Mixture of direct growers, pack houses, veg processors, and then a few random bakeries and chicken ready meal factory, for example, just to keep me on my toes. One of the things that you will potentially get slightly confused of when you talk about farm standards is what's the difference between certification and accreditation. So these are the official versions, if you like, of what accreditation is and what certification is. However, in simple terms, what I would say is accreditation relates to the actual assurance scheme itself. Certification relates to the company who wants to become certified against an accredited certification scheme. So for example, Red Tractor would be an accredited scheme. You would become certified against the Red Tractor standard. Okay, so the certification is the check that somebody will come and do on your company, make sure that you're actually doing what it should be doing to meet the requirements of the external standard. So in terms of certification, generally the process would be you apply for whichever standard you want to, you have a look at the standard, you go through it, hopefully you put lots of evidence together. Somebody will then come out, although they are doing remote audits as well at the moment for Red Tractor, and they'll ask you a whole host of questions. In simple terms, think of it as an MOT for your business. Okay, so there is no set standard as such in terms of here's a set of documents that you have to fill these documents in and you'll always pass. It will be very much dependent on your business, what you grow, what you produce. Do you pack on site? Do you sell in bulk? What kind of operation do you actually have? Is it large, small? In terms of the evidence, so there'll be a mixture of evidence. So some of it is documentation, so things like spray records, field risk assessments, for example. Some of it will be visual, so walk around the farm if they're actually there, and they are trying to do remote walkarounds at the moment, but it's a bit questionable whether that really works. And then some of it could be in the form of electronic information. So I know some people use things like Gatekeeper, Crop Walker to record all their field activities and spray records on there as well. Okay, so in terms of different standards, the ones on the left, so Salsa and BRCGS, they relate to food processors. So from a fresh produce point of view, if you are packing product into a box, into a bag, and then selling it, you could, if you wanted to, become Salsa or BRCGS certified. Neither standard really gets involved anything up to the point where it actually gets into the pack house. So the growing, they're not interested in, wouldn't cover anything like that. The middle two are what's called baseline standards. So these are the most common baseline standards in the UK. So Red Tractor, by far and beyond the biggest one in the UK, and then GlobalG.A.P, which is generally, particularly if you want to export product to Europe, a lot of people would expect you to have GlobalG.A.P. And then on the right-hand side, there are other standards available. So there are organic standards. There's a couple I've put up there. There are others. I think it's about between 6 and 8 different organic certification bodies who can accredit or can certify your farm. There's also the LEAF standard, which is an environmental standard. LEAF requires you to have a baseline standard before you can actually have your LEAF audit. So you would need a Red Tractor or GlobalG.A.P beforehand. The organic standards don't. Okay, so as I said, Salsa aimed primarily at small food producers, processors. BRCGS food is aimed at larger food producers, retailer-owned branded. They don't cover the agricultural practices prior to the products entering the pack house. Anybody who is interested in Salsa, very roughly, it's around £700 for the audit, and it's a maximum 1-day audit. BRCGS, you're probably looking at around £2,500 to £3,000 for the audit, and it's a minimum 2.5 day audit now. In terms of the additional audits, so the organic audits, there are 2 of the 8 UK official organic certification standards. If you are growing organic, then you may want to become certified against the organic standards, and that's really to check that your methods of growing crops and you've got the right field checks to make sure that it's had sufficient time out of the conventional system. Most of those cover livestock as well as fresh produce, and there are some that include fish as well. LEAF is predominantly all around environmental standards, so it's really trying to push the sort of the greenness that growers can do, whether it be carbon footprinting, energy use, water use, that kind of thing. It also covers community engagement as well, and Open Farm Sunday is quite a big thing for leaf growers. So in terms of the baseline farm audits, like I said, there's 2. The baseline standards are really there to ensure food safety, operator safety, and a basic environmental standard are in place. They both Red Tractor and GlobalG.A.P cover similar requirements, and they have actually been benchmarked against each other as being equivalent, but they're asked in very different ways, and some of the terminology is quite different. And we'll cover that in a little bit. In terms of Red Tractor, there are actually 6 different standards available. So beef and lamb, dairy, pigs, poultry, crops, which are combinable, cereals and sugar beets, and then the fresh produce, so root veg, stone fruit, soft fruit, herbs, salads, everything else in there. The GlobalG.A.P has a slightly different approach. So you have what's called an all-farm base to begin with. You then have, for fresh produce, you would then have a crops base. You would then have the fruit and vegetable section as well. So in effect, you've got 3 different documents to actually work to work out all the questions you're going to get asked in your audit. They also have within the crop space, so there are standards, or a standard for flowers and ornamentals, combinable crops. There are also separate audits for aquaculture and for livestock. Red Tractor is predominantly, well, it is UK based. You can only become certified if you're within the UK, whereas GlobalG.A.P is a worldwide standard. I've put there's a maximum of 200 questions. That is dependent upon the crop and activities. So if you don't have a pack house, you can take out quite a few of the questions automatically. Other ones, things like if you don't grow under temporary crop structures, that's another section that becomes removed there. In my view, it's fairly logically laid out. There's one document for the base standard. It does give you some guidance and links to other bits of guidance that are available. Currently, there are some crop-specific questions, so that each of the crops that they cover has or may have some additional questions that will get asked as well. In terms of GlobalG.A.P, it's slightly different. So there's around 60 questions in the all farms base, 110 in the crop space, and then 56 questions in the fruit and veg. I would say there's limited guidance in there, and it's not overly easy to get your head around it. Just as an example, for both standards, there is a requirement to do an internal audit once a year. The Red Tractor version is, I think, a 12-page document. The GlobalG.A.P version is 126. So when you go to print it out, just make sure that you've got a lot of paper and a lot of ink in your printer. Any questions so far on that? Happy with that? Okay. So why do you want to become certified? If you are producing fresh produce, the whole aim of it is to actually sell that product to somebody. And in an ideal world, everything you grow, you will sell. Okay. You'll also, in an ideal world, be able to sell to the person who's actually going to pay the most for that product. However, life in general doesn't happen like that, so it's not always that good. I would say very roughly, if you look at a 7-year cycle, you'll have 3 years average. You'll have 1 year that's slightly better than average. You'll have 1 year that's fantastic. You'll have 1 year that's slightly less than average, and 1 year that's horrendous. Maybe it will depend on the different crops. I know that some of the root crop people that I've worked with, the last couple of years, they have suffered quite a lot due to weather. So there are more extreme weather events happening now. Can certainly cause a lot of issues with fresh produce. One of the other issues, I would say within the UK, we probably don't place an awful lot of value on food. As long as it's there and available in the supermarket, we just pick it off the shelf. We don't really want to spend money on ethically sourced product. If we're going to the main supermarkets, we just want it cheap and cheerful and it's on the plate. However, the UK population are also very good at being very vocal on certain environmental issues. And I would probably say that social media has its benefits, but it also has a lot of issues. And it's very easy that people can start certain trends without really knowing whether they actually are talking the truth or not. Okay. So there's a lot of issues going on in the background that cause growers, particularly fresh produce people, a lot of issues. So why do you want to get certified? There are certain retailers who require you to have Red Tractor or GlobalG.A.P certification so that you can supply into them. So most of the main supermarkets in the UK, if you want to supply direct to them, or even indirectly via certain pack houses, or if it's for certain retailers, even if it's going to be used in their ready meals, for example, you will have to have Red Tractor certification as a minimum. In an ideal world, obviously all your crop is perfect, it's got nice skin finish, it's tender, it's all the rest of the right attributes. However, there are certain times where you may have blemish product that you wouldn't want to really sell as first class product, but it's perfectly good if you're going to turn it into jams, things like that. So again, certain processing markets will only accept your product if you've got Red Tractor or GlobalG.A.P. You may want to use the Red Tractor logo for marketing your products. The one thing I would say about it is by becoming Red Tractor certified as a farm doesn't automatically give you the right to use the logo on your packaging. You would need to have an additional license from Red Tractor, and off the top of my head, it starts at around about £600 to have that. And you would need to be able to show that the product you're actually going to pack with the Red Tractor logo on is or only comes from a UK Red Tractor sourced farm. You could also use the Red Tractor to promote food safety of your products. And I would say looking at food safety incidents around the world, looking at what we have to do in the UK, I would say we probably have some of the best food safety standards in the world. Okay, and the amount of recalls, although we do have a lot of recalls in the UK, there are very, very few related to fresh produce. Okay, if you compare that to certain other developed countries, they seem to have an awful lot more than what we do. Okay, so the way I would look at Red Tractor, it allows a door to become unlocked. It's not necessarily going to give you carte blanche to walk in and sell your product at the first opportunity, but at least it allows you or allows the customer to know that you are operating to a set standard, you've passed the audit, and they would be happy to take that product. So again, some of the things you can actually use your certificate. You can use your certification to promote good practices around the farm. A lot of people, if they are leaf certified, they will display leaf mark signs around the place. They will also do open farm Sunday events. So historically, that's been actually people turning up on site and going around the farm, seeing actually how their food is produced. Potentially, you can use it to promote your product above somebody else's. So, you know, why buy imported product when you can buy ours. Here's all the standards we work to. Here's all the list of questions we have to apply to or comply with, rather. But what I would say is, before you jump in and say, I want to get certified tomorrow, just be aware of actually what the requirements are and what you need to do to become certified. So, quick question for you. This is my sort of very rough and ready scale of how good do you think you are, okay? Up at the top left-hand corner, these are the people who are whiter than white. Everything is done perfect 100% of the time, regardless of cost. The bottom left is, doesn't matter what they will do, they will cut corners, anything they can do to make money, anything they can do to save money, they will do it, type thing. And then the rest in the middle are really the people who either could do better or they're fairly reasonable. Okay, so for the growers there, where would you say you sit in there?
Could always do better.
Could always do better. Okay. Okay. When I was starting out, I tried to work out, is there an easy way to look at farmers or businesses in general? And I would say there are kind of 4 types, really. There are the very professional, they're probably big, large companies, they've got sufficient resources to employ HR people, technical people, all of it type thing. And they will have no issues whatsoever. You have the next level down who they're very business minded, but they're probably slightly smaller, can't really afford to have a full-time person doing it, but are quite willing to listen to other people giving them advice. The next one down is a group of people who they do their best. They don't really have any major sort of food safety or ethical issues, but they will be pushing the boundaries on certain things. The last group of people are the people that everything gets written on the back of a cigarette packet, not really caring about any rules and regulations, and don't really care what they do as long as it makes them money. In terms of from a red tractor point of view, if you're in the bad guys section, don't bother. It's not really for you. If you're in the perfect good guys, you've probably already got it, or would be very easy to get it if you haven't. If you're in the middle, there are certainly benefits to getting it, I would say. So if you think about it, just go back to basics. If you're growing a product, would you be happy to eat it yourself? Okay. So when I leave an audit, one of the questions I kind of ask myself is, would I be happy to eat the product that they actually produce on this site? And if the answer to that is no, then I've got to ask myself a question, well, have I actually passed them and allowed them to produce unsafe food? Okay. If you're not happy of producing or eating your own food, why would you expect somebody else to eat it? Just some slightly scary statistics. So this is just taking some information from a thing called RASAF portal. In the last, between the 1st of November 2020 and the 30th of November 2020, so that is 1 month, there were 504 incidents of pesticides in products. Okay. And if you look at the right-hand slide, it will show you the countries. So there's probably no major surprise that India and Turkey are up there. However, there might be a few surprises, things like the Netherlands, Germany, France, and Spain. Okay. So just another one is peppers. So this is specifically looking at peppers. We can grow some peppers in the UK, but not all year round. So we do import a lot of them. For, I think this was a year period, there were 193 incidents of pesticides found in peppers. 100 of them came from Turkish peppers. Okay, so if you're importing Turkish peppers, you may want to look at controls you have. Again, for oranges, 24 incidents of pesticides in oranges. And again, Turkey, 11 had the most incidents there. In America, they do seem to have quite a few recalls around lettuce and spinach. This was one from November last year. Found what's called E. coli, so it's a bacteria that can cause food poisoning within there. Another one is frozen raspberries had norovirus in them. So again, it's just kind of to show you that food out there can have issues with it, and certainly food from other countries may not be as safe as the food that we produce in the UK. But one of the things people say is, well, it's all paperwork. It's not all paperwork. A lot of it is around what you do on a day-to-day basis. And generally what I would say is you're probably doing an awful lot of the things that are actually required anyway. You just might not be documenting it down, or it's just not in a nice, easy to find format. So there is no set way to record the documentation down or the evidence down. I've obviously got a set of documents that I issue out to people, and that's tailor-made to their individual farm and their individual operations. There are some people that just have a diary and everything gets written into the diary. There's very fancy electronic systems that can cost thousands of pounds, but can tell you exactly what's going on at any minute. There will be certain things that you just take pictures of. So I know for the leaf standard, one of my growers, they take a picture of the ditches and the flower margins on the fields once a month. And they've kind of built that into a calendar, and they just attach that onto the leaf audit as their evidence that they're actually working correctly. When you actually have an audit, what does the auditor want to see? They're effectively looking for compliance. So as an auditor, you go to a site and you want to tick all the boxes. You're not necessarily there to actually find non-conformance. If you, and this is more from a retailer point of view, so probably more related to food processors rather than direct farms, the retailers may have a slightly different view, that their auditors do go out to, they go out to check for conformance, but they do also look for non-compliance as well. Most auditors, so most farm auditors, will go out, they want a nice easy life, they want to be supplied with the evidence. So think about being able to provide the information logically in a timely manner. If they've got to wait around for 20, 30 minutes for you to bring one piece of paper back, it's not really helpful to them. We have what's called due diligence in the food industry. So this is, you've taken all reasonable precautions. So things will go wrong. As long as you've done something about it, if it does go wrong and you've learned from it and it's not going to happen again and it's not caused any major issues, then I don't have any issues of actually writing that down and showing that to auditors at all. I think a big thing is the spirit of the site. So how the site is actually bought into a standard. If you are being told that you have to achieve this certification, you're probably less likely to really believe in it than if you actually decide yourself, I want to go for it because I want to show how good I am. Okay. So how do you actually go about it? Where to start? The first thing is be prepared. Actually, have you got the standards? Have you read them? Type thing. It's not the most interesting thing to read, and certainly you're probably busy enough during the day that it's going to get left tonight to actually read all the standards. Decide what level you want to be. So do you want to be the leading standard grower out there, or are you happy that as long as you're doing a reasonable job and you've got no major issues, you're quite happy just to have a pass? Think about what evidence needs to be provided. So certainly the red tractor standard, it will tell you what evidence you need to an extent. Have you got that? What extra can you show? One of the things I would say is, if you think you're doing something well, promote it, really show off about it, because that may make the difference between the auditors going, yeah, they're just ticking boxes, or in actual fact, yeah, they do actually know what they're doing and they are doing a good job on it. Obviously, ask for help. So, questions put through to Tyfu Cymru, and certainly, there is the one-to-one support available. So just, I've got a couple of examples here. So just pesticides. So this is a pesticide policy I've put together. One of the questions within the red tractor standard is around having pesticide policy. So why do you use them? When do you spray them? What do you actually spray? Do you look at the risk level to the environment? How do you build in cultural methods as well as chemical methods? Is there the choice of using biological controls, things like that? The other one that I will show you, field risk assessment. So before you actually plant any crops, part of Red Tractor says you should have a look at the field and see what the risks are in the field. That can cover a whole host of things. So that's partly around soil type. It's partly about what's been grown in there in the past. What hazards are there? So I've known particularly root crop people where they're wanting deep cultivations, they go through with a flat lifter. If there's buried cables or buried pipes in there, they have been known to cut through them. What about the footpaths? What can you do about the footpaths? You can't necessarily get rid of them, but do you need to put potentially electric fencing up alongside them? If you've got footpaths, do you consider when you're actually going to spray? So I know there are certain fields on some of my growers that they will avoid early mornings, late nights, because they know that people will be in the houses nearby. They'll go during the day, for example, or potentially at 3 o'clock in the morning when hopefully most people are asleep. Any questions on that? No, not at the moment. Okay.
Yeah, Malcolm, could I just check? Did you say how much roughly Red Tractor works out at?
No, but give me a minute and I can easily find that out. So it is based on not that one. It is based on the crop that you are growing. So they have different categories of crops. So category 1 crop would be a salad crop. A category 2 crop would be something like carrots, and a category 3 crop would be something like potatoes. So there's kind of a bit of a risk assessment that they've done on it. Depending on the area that you grow and the category will depend on how much it costs. There's two parts to the cost. There's a base standard and a royalty standard. The cheapest, you would be looking at just over £300 a year. The most expensive is just under £1,100 a year. Okay. There are two other additional fees that you can also potentially go for. So if somebody wants you to supply into Tesco's, there is a Tesco Nurture add-on. It's done at the same time as your Red Tractor audit, and effectively all it does is checks that you have put your pesticide list onto food experts and it's checked that they've all been approved. That's an additional £40. If you wanted to export, you can also have a GlobalG.A.P equivalence certificate done at the same time as your Red Tractor audit. And again, that's around about £150 for that fee. So
thank you.
Very roughly somewhere between 300 and 1,300, something like that, depending on what you're growing as a very rough basis. Okay. Just to make you aware that both Red Tractor and GlobalG.A.P are actually going through draft reviews at the moment. So Red Tractor is going to launch its version 5 standard for auditing against in November 2021. GlobalG.A.P will launch its version 6 standard in 2023. And if you look at the little diagram to the right, that's the pathway for the GlobalG.A.P change. Okay, so that kind of gives you some indication as to how complex GlobalG.A.P is. And to be fair, they've given, there is a 4 or 5 month period of translations of all the documents into different languages. Obviously for Red Tractor, it's fairly straightforward for them to do a review. So there's a draft out for consultation at the moment. In terms of why, all standards, whether it's a farming standard or a food standard or any other type of standard, they're always under constant review just to make sure that they're appropriate and to address any current issues. A couple of things that Red Tractor wants to focus more on. One is the environment. So certainly within England, we've got the review and looking at elms going forward. I'm not too sure what's happening on that side within Wales, but I'm going to guess that whatever comes in after single farm payment will have more environmental focus on it. So if your baseline standard has a higher level of environmental requirements in it, chances are you're going to meet whatever the new single farm payment substitute is. The other one they're looking at is worker welfare, and this is particularly around modern day slavery. That does occur from time to time. The Red Tractor, so this is just taken from their presentation, them going away to a lot more food safety driven approach, cutting it down in terms of they're going from 24 sections and 54 crop protocols to 10 crop production focused sections, and then some other bits and pieces. I won't read through all of that. Version 4 has got around 200 questions. Version 5 has around 293. What I would say in that is where a current question has probably a number of bullet points underneath it as one question, each of those bullet points could well be a question in the new standard. So that's why a lot of it is actually, when I looked through it, it didn't look to be that many changes. And I was quite surprised when I actually counted it up. I would also say that it, from an auditing point of view, it makes it a lot more logical that it's grouping It's kind of all your personnel records. So whether it's training, sprayer, Narosa points, that kind of thing, they're all in one section. Again, I would certainly say if you've got anybody who is looking at the red tractor, I wouldn't be put off by looking at, I'm going to have a whole load more questions in the future. I don't think you will. There's a lot of the paperwork that is already there. Certainly the systems I've got, I would say we've got the paperwork there or minor tweaks to it. So it's not really that much of an issue. You'll probably find that an awful lot of it is not actually applicable to you. So if you haven't got a pack house, again, there's like a big section that's not really applicable to you. Unless you grow hops or watercress, there's no additional crop specific questions as well. So just kind of a summary, it's not all doom and gloom. I would say in many cases, it would certainly be worth looking at farm certification. Go into it for the right reasons. Go into it because you want to do it rather than you're being necessarily forced to. Think carefully beforehand. Do the maths, make sure it works out, and then just remember help is there. Any questions?
Thank you, Malcolm. I think that was all really informative and very clear. Just no particular questions, I don't think, but it's a sort of investigate at this stage, isn't it? And let's see what's available and what's out there. So as you said, the one-to-one support is there for growers if anybody wants to pursue this further and look specifically at perhaps the red tractor as an accreditation stream. So that's a great start for us. Thank you, Malcolm. That's really, really helpful.
Just one question for me. So particularly for the growers there, we're looking at doing some more webinars in the future. There is an option to either do one on HACCP or one that kind of looks a little bit more in depth at the red tractor. So sort of going through the different sections and what's covered in each of the different sections and what kind of evidence would you be looking to provide. I'm just really interested which one you would want to see first.
Ali say, Malcolm, could you tell us more about the organic produce certification schemes?
Okay, so there are 8 of them. They kind of all work to the same, what used to be EU legislation in terms of an overriding sort of requirement. However, they all have their own different standard. There is one in Wales, but I don't believe that covers a fresh produce. I think it covers livestock, but not fresh produce. In terms of the other standards, so Soil Association is probably by far above the largest and probably the most well-known one. There are other ones, so OFNF, Organic Farmers Feed. There is a list of them so I can get hold of that list and forward that across to you.
I think actually, Ali, I'll make sure it's on there, but I think there's an article on the Knowledge Hub specifically on the organic certification as well.
Is that? Okay.
So I'll search that up and send over the link.
Thanks. No, I just find the organic, the Soil Association for what we're doing is just so expensive, and you know, it's just not really worth us doing at the moment, although we do grow to organic standards. That's what's frustrating about it all.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so the 8 that I've got are Organic Farmers and Growers, Organic Food Federation, Soil Association, Biodynamic Association Certification, Irish Organic Certification, Organic Trust CLB, Quality Welsh Food Certification and OF&G Scotland. The Quality Welsh Food Certification only covers dairy and livestock, but the other ones have options for produce and livestock. Generally, all of them, I would say, are probably going to be similar. I would say it's possibly down to who are you actually selling your product to? Do they have a requirement for a specific certification body to be used, or are they happy that as long as you've got an organic standard, it's fine?
At the moment, that all our customers are quite happy, but I am supplying a restaurant, and it just worries me a little bit that they might be asking me for standards and things.
Possibly.
I'm not obviously supplying them at the moment because we're on lockdown. Yeah. But you know, he loves the salad, spicy salad leaves to put as a garnish and things like that. And if you're saying there's an E. coli risk, I just pick them and give them to him. That's basically how it works at the moment. Okay. You know, so I don't know. I don't know if I should be going down that road or not.
There is nothing to stop you going down the route of red tractor. It's not specific to organic, but it would certainly, from a food safety point of view, it covers all the requirements there. The organic standards are more focused on the fact that it is organic rather than the food safety, although they do cover bits of them.
That's interesting, yeah.
So, I mean, if you wanted to have a look at the actual standards, I've got some of them. Certainly got the Red Tractor one. I've got the Soil Association one. I can probably get hold of the other ones. So, yeah.
Well, that might be helpful, but I'm only doing fruit and veg, really. That's all I do. We don't do any meat or dairy or anything like that. It's just, and we're quite small scale.
Okay.
So it's getting bigger.
The main issue from America, I would say, they changed their legislation, so they brought in the Food Safety Modernization Act. I'm going to say roughly around 4 or 5 years ago. Prior to that, they worked it out that about 1 in 6 Americans would have food poisoning a year. And when you then hear that there was no legislation or no farm certification standard that stopped them spraying slurry over salad crop, you kind of wonder, well, 1 and 1 make 2 type thing. So yeah.
Okay. Well, that would be really helpful if I could have a look at them and I can make a decision and discuss it with my husband. I know I've always been put off whenever I've looked at the Soil Association and spoken to people about what's involved. You know, having to account for every single seed you sow and every single where you get your seeds from. And I use my own seeds. We produce our own seeds.
Yeah.
You know, it's stuff like that I don't know if I really want to go to that trouble for what we do, but if we are going to get bigger and expanding, certainly in the last year, our business has trebled. So
okay,
I need to think about it.
Yeah.
I'll email you, Ali, with the organic details. Make sure you've got the link, and I'll put Malcolm's email there as well. And then if you want to pick up after this, you can do and look at it further. And all the support from Malcolm is covered. So, you know, have the conversation, explore and see where it goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Yeah. That'd be lovely. Thanks, Sarah.
No problem.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was, sorry, go on, Malcolm.
I was just going to say, any other questions or?
No.
No, that's great. That's great. We'll draw it to a close. That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much, Malcolm.